2020. I am going to call the meeting of the Education and Research Committee to order. I don't know, Ben, are you going to do roll call?
Sure. Mr. Harabidian?
I'm here.
Excellent. And Member Francisco Kim? Not present. Okay, well, at the moment, we are in a committee, so we do not require a quorum. Please forgive the agenda item title there. And so we'll go ahead and start this committee. It's on to you.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Welcome, everyone who is listening and watching. We are going to go right into public comment for items not on the agenda. And for all the participants who do plan on commenting on item number 4, which is our recommendation on language for a waiver for the clinical distance education, please wait until item number 4 to comment on that. We do very much look forward to hearing from all of you, particularly the schools, on that item. But for this item, agenda item number 3, this is just for items not on the agenda. So we'll open that up for public comment.
Thank you.
This is the moderator, and before I go to public comment, I do want to advise the committee that Francisco Kim has joined us.
Oh, excellent.
With that, at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the question and answer feature, which is a question mark inside a box located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and type "I would like to make a comment." All comments will be addressed in the order that they are received. You will be provided 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. At the end of your time, your microphone will then be remuted. With that, I will pause a moment to allow individuals an opportunity to access this feature. Does appear we have an individual identified as Yoon Kim. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good morning, this is Yoon Kim from Empress College. And I actually have a question about the testing sites. I understand that the sites are closed right now. And what is the board's plan for making those testing sites available for our graduates? Thank you.
At this time, it does not appear we have any additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
Feature has been closed.
Mr. Baudet, would you be able to follow up individually or just tell us right now quickly on the status of the test sites, or it's something that we can just address later on in the meeting?
We can try addressing that later on in the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you for that comment. We will move on now to item number 4. And Mr. Hurt is going to give us an overview on what's going on and the latest development, which we received the development actually yesterday. So, Jay?
Yeah, thank you, John. So before I get into the memo, I'm going to speak a bit. Subsequent to preparation of these meeting materials and posting, there was a change by the Accreditation Commission for Acupuncture and OLA Medicine in terms of their number of hours that they're allowing for both observation of clinical distance education and also as of for actually the requirement for live participation. So I think the easiest way to do this would be to just go through those numbers in the memo. If you look at the second page of the memo, I'll just mention what those hours are, and then that'll true up the memo. And then there is one other change, but it was captured in the memo. So that'll be easier for us to untangle there. So if you go to page 2, when it says at least 75 hours of ACOM's total 150-hour clinical observation requirement is, which is allowing for up to 75 hours of distance clinical practice observation. The change that has been adopted by the commission is to do at least 25 hours of the required amount. So, and then up to 125 hours of distance observation. In terms of the live supervision, Formerly, it was 450 hours, but now they're moving that to, the commission has moved it to 250 hours of clinical live training and 450 hours of distant clinical practice. So, that's the impactful change. The other changes I will mention when I go through the memo, but for everybody who's in attendance or people who are new, I'm going to start just going through the memo, and I'll capture those changes as I go through the memo as well. So the COVID-19 pandemic has created challenges in the ability to safely provide face-to-face, physically present training for acupuncture trainees. This has severely impacted acupuncture training programs' ability to provide training for their students. Alternative means for other methods of delivery of acupuncture training, such as telehealth or other forms of distance learning models that can be included as part of an approved curriculum, do not currently exist within the Acupuncture License Act. So California Code of Regulations, section 1399-434H states that the total clinical practice curriculum shall consist of 950 hours, of which 75% of the training must be completed at a clinic owned by the school. The requirement further specifies that acupuncture trainee shall complete 150 hours of supervised clinical practice observation. During the initial 275 hours of clinical practice, the clinical supervisors are required to be physically present at all times during the diagnosis and treatment of the patient. And then for the second period of 275 hours of training, the clinical supervisor shall be physically present at the needling of the patient. And for the remaining time spent in clinical practice training, 250 hours, the clinic supervisor shall otherwise be in close proximity to the location at which the patient is being treated during the clinical instructions. These regulations create a difficult challenge for training programs to offer continued clinical training opportunities to students during a pandemic. With evolving and varying public health advisories and with direct physical contact, where physical contact is to be minimized wherever possible. To be considered as an approved educational and training format in California, a relationship is required with the Accreditation Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, the sole national accreditor for acupuncture and Oriental training programs in the United States. Accreditation also allows training programs the ability to convey degree titles and to offer students Title IV financial aid. Financial aid funding is critical to the continued operations of both training institutions and the students' ability to attend and complete their education and training. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, ACOM created a temporary emergency clinical distance education waiver, which allows a process to offer some hours of clinical training as distance learning or telehealth. As the pandemic impact worsened and programs were better able to gauge what was possible, this waiver evolved to the reduction in the required amount of in-person clinical education. The waiver in its current form is available to accredited programs upon completion of approved application and approval from ACOM. For programs operating in California, the minimum required ACOM decree program includes acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. The live in-person clinical education under the current version of the ACOM waiver is as follows. At least 25. Now I'm putting in the change here, so you'll just have to kind of read, see the lines written in the memo here. At least 25 hours of ACOM's total 150 clinical observation requirement will be live, which is allowing programs to offer up to 125 hours of clinical practice observation, and at least 250 hours of the total 700 clinical internship hours are required to be live, allowing 450 hours of clinical distance education practice. There are different hourly supervision requirements between California clinical curriculum requirements and those of ACOM to consider. The chart below presents a comparison of the supervisory criteria in each agency. And I've already stated that, so I'm not going to go through the chart again. The California Acupuncture Board had for the California Acupuncture Board to allow the inclusion of distance education, the board would need to have a vehicle to allow the ability to waive physically present regulatory requirements. Governor Newsom's executive order makes it possible for the Department of Consumer Affairs regulatory boards to request temporary waivers of both laws and regulation. Board staff has created a waiver seeking exemptions of regulations from the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs that will allow the board to align the waiver ACOM is providing for training programs, allowing students to complete the hours and board-approved curriculum. The only change to the emergency clinical distance education waiver would allow for allowance of the limited number of clinical distance education as stated above. There's actually another change that has just been extended throughout the period of the pandemic. So that is a new change as well. The acceptance of the ACOM emergency clinical distance education waiver criteria would not change the current content or the total required hours of training contained in existing board-approved training curriculums. The only change would be that the emergency clinical distance education waiver, since last brought before, well, it has evolved a number of times since about August 27, 2020, our last committee meeting, is during the COVID-19 eruption, ACOM is extending current flexibilities until further notice, subject to federal, state, and local limitations, as opposed to the emergency clinical distance education waiver, previous expiration date of December 31st, 2020. Additionally, feedback from a number of education and training programs was received stating that regulatory requirements of 75% of all training be completed at a clinic owned by a school was limiting the ability to provide in-person training hours that could be available from existing integrative health systems within their communities, including hospitals, medical groups, private acupuncture clinics for their students who are in clinical training. Based on this information, staff has included regulatory language for the board to consider that reduces the requirement of 75% to 50% of the clinical training to be completed in a clinic owned and operated by a school. Due to these significant changes in the requirements of live supervision curriculum hours and unprecedented circumstances due to COVID-19, board staff felt this issue should be brought before the board's Education and Research Committee for further discussion, with a request that the committee make recommendations to the board for further action. So just moving on from that memo, if you turn your page, the next page in the packet is stating the current regulations as they are in 4927, Business and Profession Code 4927.51A. And you'll notice the pages want to have some highlighted hours on there. The next pages is the previous ACOM waiver in its format, but you've been given the more modern one, or the latest one. And then the last one is the proposed changes to current regulations that we would include as part of a waiver request to the Director of the Consumer Affairs to be able to waive these temporarily only during the time of the pandemic. And the other thing to remember too is ACOM's waiver is only until situations change, and it could change in different places nationally, and they would still reflect those. If California had no problems, then those would end at that point. So if you notice that when we're moving through the ones, the changes have been underlined that we're adding language to. And if we look at the first change is in the first paragraph that reflects it's changing the required supervision in a clinic offer from a school from 75 to 50%. So it's just a simple strikeout and change in number. And then if we go down to H 1399-434 H4, I'll just read it, the whole paragraph, because it captures the changes there too. During the initial 275 hours of diagnosis, evaluation, and clinical practice, the clinical supervisor shall be physically or electronically present at all times during diagnosis and treatment of the patient. Thereafter, for a second period of 275 hours, the clinic supervisor shall be physically or electronically present at the needling of the patient. The clinic supervisor shall otherwise be in close proximity, physically or electronically, to the location at which the patient is being treated during clinical instruction. The student shall also consult with the clinic supervisor before and after each treatment. So really the addition in this paragraph is or electronically or physically or electronically to allow for our regulations to be able to accept the ACOM waivers, and we were understanding that because over the period of the last 8 months it was changing so much that we had to find a vehicle that would at least allow this. And then the next stage is just to bring it to the board and see what their opinion is, and have them weigh in on this. So that's completes what I have to say for this item. John?
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to kick it to Francisco for any questions that you have.
I'm okay with those, because this is nationwide, worldwide dilemma. So I'm okay with all this change as long as the waiver effective.
This is the moderator.
Can you come closer to the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, or I think you're on speaker. Maybe take it off a speaker. It's hard to hear you. But I think the gist of what you said is that you're okay with this.
Okay, hold on. Let me turn off the other speaker.
And while he's re-engaging, I don't have any real questions. I know we talked about this last meeting. I'm fine with this, especially considering the duration of the emergency orders and obviously reassessing once things quiet down. So I'm good with the staff recommendation, and I don't really have any questions. I think most of my questions were answered last time, but I would be interested to hear from the schools. Francisco? And I think Francisco was on the same page.
Francisco, you may be muted if you're trying to speak.
This is the moderator. We've actually lost Francisco at the moment.
Okay. Well, as he's trying to log in, why don't we open it up for public comment? Because I do think that everyone is interested to hear what the various constituents think. I am going to have to drop from this for a personal call at about 9, just before 10. So at that point, if Francisco's on, I'm going to delegate him as the moderator, as the host, the chair of the meeting. And if he is not back on, then we're going to probably have to adjourn the meeting at that point. So I'd like to get as many comments before then as possible.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the panel for public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located in the lower right portion of your screen and type, "I would like to make a public comment." You will be provided 3 minutes and provided a 30-second warning. With that, I will now pause a moment to allow individuals time to access this feature. First up, we have an individual identified as Ron Zeidman. Your microphone has been unmuted.
This is Ron Zeidman, president of Five Branches University. I commend the committee for its action in supporting the furtherance of the education of students during this very difficult time. The one question I would have is on the 50% allowance for what we call externships for students to be able to study in hospitals and other medical settings outside of the university's ownership. That's a very good idea. It's certainly useful for us at this time because some students are studying in clinics which are seeing patients, so they're getting very good education there. And the question is, will this 50% be only during this pandemic time, or would it be extended for after the pandemic as well? Thank you.
Next, we have Lang Tang Ritchie. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Lang Tang Ritchie. I am the clinical director at Pacific College of Health and Science. I just want to thank the committee for consideration of this matter. And I know that it will definitely alleviate the concerns of a lot of our students and our community population. So thank you so much.
At this time, it does not appear we have any additional requests for public comments. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
Feature has been closed.
Well, thank you for those two comments. And I think that given where we are and how much time that we've spent with this over the last few months in the two meetings, I think that we should push forward on my recommendation of having the full board approve the waiver language as presented, and get this on record. To answer Mr. Zeidman's question, I believe, from my understanding, is the 50% would last through however long the emergency is deemed present. So I would assume that once the pandemic is over, and we get back to a state of normalcy, and I'm not sure how we define that, that it would subside. But I think that's something that staff has to address.
I can weigh in on that, John. This is Jay Hurt speaking. The process would be is we would apply to the Department of Consumer Affairs, and if the waiver was approved, that would be approved for a period of time. And the waivers are sort of moving now during the period of pandemic, so it would be temporary. To make it a permanent change, it would have to be done as part of a curriculum change part, which that's how it would have to go to make it be permanent. So
that makes sense. Okay. Well, go ahead.
Mr. Arbodian, if I may.
Yes.
Just to clarify, we would work with the Department of Consumer Affairs and Business and Consumer Services Agency to work with the governor to receive a waiver for these items. So just so that the public and our stakeholders are aware, it's not just a departmental action. This has to go all the way up to the governor to work on this waiver. So thank you. And yes, as Jay mentioned, it would end when the governor's waiver on this item, should he decide to do it, is noted as ending. There will be an end date on his executive order if there's a waiver issued on this. For any permanent change to the 75% hours in a clinic owned and operated by the school, to make that any other number would require a regulatory action, and could be something the board can consider at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you. Francisco, I see you've rejoined us. I'm going to move, I don't know if we need a formal motion, but I'll move for to send this to the full body with the approval recommendation.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Excellent.
Is that sufficient then, MJ?
That is sufficient, yes. And we can go ahead and bring that up at the full board meeting under that agenda item.
Excellent. Well, that concludes our committee meeting, and I will move to adjourn.
So adjourned.
Thank you.
We will.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair Arbodian.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Francisco Kim. We will adjourn for until 10:30, when we will come back for the Licensing and Examination Committee meeting.
Is it the same link, Ben, that we should use?
Correct. Thank
Okay.
you, Member Arbodian. Just go ahead and you can either relog back onto this link, or you can stay on this link and come back. We'll come back shortly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.